Welcome to this Engaging the Mind program. Hi, I'm Althea Brooks, and I'm Senior Director of Lifetime Learning in the UVA's Office of Engagement. We have nearly 700, actually a little over 700, registered for Saving St. John School and the Rosenwald School legacy. We're thrilled to welcome you here today, and I'm eager to learn right along with you more about the Rosenwald School's legacy. We received many questions in advance of this program. Should you have a question during the program, please add it to the Q&A box. Our speakers will answer as many questions as time permits. My colleague, Teresa Gano, Project Associate with Lifetime Learning, will join us later in this program. We're fortunate to have two speakers share with us today. Joseph Lahendro, better known as Jody, and Rebecca Bowler Kinney, Becky. Allow me to introduce them. After nearly 17 years, Jody Lahendro, a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, retired in 2021 as Historic Preservation Architect at the University of Virginia. His final project at UVA included managing the Cars Hill and the Rotunda renovations. Prior to Jody's time at UVA, he owned an architectural practice in Richmond, Virginia for 18 years, specializing in historic preservation. In retirement, Jody provides pro bono services to nonprofit organizations with historic buildings associated with African Americans. He received a Bachelor's of Architecture from Virginia Tech and a Master of Architectural History from the University of Virginia. I've worked with Jody for many years as he restored historic buildings on grounds. We shared many of his preservation projects and similar programs. Thank you, Jody, for your dedication and your time to UVA. We miss you. Rebecca Bowler Kinney. Rebecca is a native of Albemarle County, Virginia. She and her 3 siblings, as well as her mother and her mother's 7 siblings, all attended the St. John Rosenwald School. Rebecca is a retired senior program manager with 30 years of federal service at the United States Department of Defense and the United States Intelligence. She's an expert in planning, programming, and budgeting. Rebecca is the board president of the St. John Family Life and Fitness Center, which was established as a nonprofit in 2011. The center will reuse and occupy the historic St. John Rosenwald School. Friends, sit back, relax, and listen to Rebecca's story of attending St. John Rosenwald School. Please help me thank and welcome Jody and Rebecca to this Lifetime Learning Engaging the Mind program. Jody, the microphone is all yours. Please begin the conversation.
Thank you, Althea. And it's an honor to be back here. Thank you for the invitation. The story of St. John School really belongs to its community, to the teachers, to the students, to the parents, to the alumni that lived this story and that gave this building meaning. As an alum, a leader in the community and the leader of the community's effort to save St. John School, Becky's story is the one that we need to hear. I will be providing some historic background to the Rosenwald program and just reviewing the design and construction process for the project, but really we have to hear from Becky, and it's her story to begin with. Becky?
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Althea, and the Lifetime Learning Office of Engagement Office. It is a privilege to be able to tell my story. And it is not just my story, it's the community story, it's the people that have helped make this project successful. And that includes the board members, committee members, the neighborhood, the alumni, the descendants, and all the volunteers that have helped us bring this story to life. I mean, it is a story that a legacy that should be told. And I'm privileged today to be able to tell our story. So our first slide. I'm Rebecca Bowler Kinney, and I'm alumni of the St. John Rosenwald School. Next slide. Okay, I jump right in. Here I am on the school ground of St. John with my best friend, Jacqueline Balkin. We were in the first grade. She's 6 years old, I'm 6 years old. We had the same birthday. Our mothers were best friends. They both went to Alma School, to St. John School. So it kind of like was a legacy that we would be best friends. And so we're in the first grade and we do look kind of excited, don't we? This is my mother on the left. My mother is alumna of St. John School also, along with her 7 siblings. She was the oldest of her family. She had 6 brothers and 1 sister. And she would always remind us that the life that we had going to school was much, much easier than her life. She was the oldest of her siblings, so she had the responsibility of getting them all off to school before she would start the school. Her mother, they lived on a farm, and her mother and father worked on that farm. And even though it was on St. John Road, better known in the older days, Turkey Sag, which is the part that she lived on, she had to walk 9 miles to school. And in the wintertime, she would tell the story of how cold it was walking to school. But midway, she would have to stop at a friend's house, Jackie's mother's house, to warm up, and then they would continue to walk on to school. And so it was a lot different than when we went to school. We had transportation. We lived at the time I started school in the area called Lindsay. And so in Lindsay, was about 6 or 7 miles from school, but we had the options of either taking the school bus or riding with our teacher, because our teacher also lived in Lindsay. On the left, you'll see my sister at the top picture, that's Virginia, and her best friend, Elsie Johnson. Virginia, as I'm the youngest of the family, so Virginia was next to me. Beside her is standing Elsie Johnson. Elsie Johnson still lives on St. John Road. And so they were best friends. At the bottom, there are my 2 brothers in the back, Archie Jr. and Robert Bowler. They both attended. They are standing also on the grounds of St. John School. Here we have a picture of 2 teachers and another long list of other teachers. And I was a little concerned when I saw this list that they say associated with St. John Rosenwald School, because I was thinking, how could that many teachers have been, have taught at St. John, because the alumni don't seem to mention many of them. But as I talked to one of the alumni who passed in this past year, 2021, Lucille Chapman, she was 106 years old. So I asked her about the teachers, and she said, well, in the beginning, they had a lot of substitute teachers. And the substitute teachers, that was because Afro-American schools a lot of times didn't have regular teachers. So that probably accounts for the number of teachers. On the left, you'll see Mrs. Virginia Merritt. Mrs. Merritt probably was my mother's teacher. I don't remember who my mother said her teacher was, but based on her age, she would have been started school in 1922. Which would have been in the old school, and then with St. John being built in 1923, she was among the first to attend the Rosenwald schools there in Cobham, Virginia. Mrs. Merritt taught in the Rosenwald School at Cobham until 1931. So that's why I'm thinking she probably taught that. But Mrs. Merritt, just to give you a little brief background on her, many of you probably know who she is. She's a very well-known teacher, established teacher in Alma County. She has a school named in her honor in Ivory, and she was the first Black superintendent for Black schools in Alma County. Mrs. Qualls on the right would have been my teacher. She taught for many years at St. John. She was a very stern teacher, a very well-respected teacher. She lived in Lindsay, and this is the one that we caught a ride to school with. So we all love Ms. Qualls, and she did a fantastic job at giving us the foundation we needed for teaching, for learning rather. So here we have a picture of St. John School in 1940. Basically, it looks the same now, except for the ground. The playground, as I remember, when I went to school, was bare, just like that, had some trees out front. The school looked the same. And I remember a pump over to your right of the school where we would pump water in a bucket most time with a dipper. And then there was a flagpole, and every day someone would have to put up the flag. And behind the school were the porta-johns that we had back in the day called outhouses. So we didn't have electricity or plumbing in the school. So there was a porta-john behind the house. That probably what you see is a class of 1940. So that probably would have been the typical size of a class. It wasn't overcrowded, but back in the older days, or the younger days when the school were younger, they had a lot more classes, a lot more students that attended the classes. Jody? Okay, so this is a classroom. It's not a classroom at St. John, but it looks very similar, the one on the left, very similar to a classroom at St. John. Identified by the long windows, the cachet of windows that provided light because we didn't have electricity, that long blackboard that stretched all the way back across the back of the room, the teacher desk that was in the front, and the rows of desks. Our desks a little different because they were single desks, not double desks. And that was a pot belly stove over to your left that provided heat for the classroom. A typical day would start with a program, a devotion. We always said the Pledge of Allegiance. We always said our prayer, and we always sung a song. And the teacher, I remember, and that would always be a globe that she would teach world history on, geography rather. And then the teacher always had a long ruler. That ruler had multiple purposes. That was for pointing on the blackboard and also for discipline, which was allowed back in those days. And she didn't hesitate to use it. But this is what I remember about the classroom. We taught, and this is another classroom, not St. John again, but just to show you one type of stove that was used to heat St. John. The statement above is one of the alumni, Julius Chapman. He was on the picture that was shown earlier with my brother. And he remembered going underneath the school to get the coal, which we heated with coal back in the day, and to bring the coal inside of the school and put it in to keep the stove going during the day to make sure we were heated. Coal was supposed to be the source that would keep you nice and warm, but to me, those rooms were always cold. St. John had 2 rooms. It was supposed to be a 2-teacher school. During the time I went to that school, there was only 1 teacher. And so she taught all the subjects 1 through 5. Some said that she taught 1 through 7. I think where the confusion is that when there were 2 teachers, at one time there was 2 teachers and husband and wife team. And then that was when they had classes 1 through 7. I believe when there only 1 teacher, the 2 other classes got transferred to another elementary school, and Mrs. Quall only taught the 1st through the 5th, as I recall. Oops, I think we skipped one, Jody. About recess. It was just about recess, showing the playground, and typical games we would play. I don't know if anybody remember pick up sticks, but that's probably one of the ones people wouldn't recognize now. It's another game similar to that, but they use block where you have to pick the little sticks up without disturbing the other one. And that was fun. And we did jump rope and lots of games that people would play with the ball and jacks and things like that. On May Day, when that was special occasion, May Day, we would have visit from other schools, or either we would visit other schools and we compete in games, and just be a lot of different activities going on those special days. We would have Halloween parties, and I remember studying a lot on Thanksgiving about Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims and the Indians and stuff like that. And we would make decoration and decorate for all these special holidays. There was nothing we bought from the store. All this stuff had to be made from our own imaginations as to what we were going to make. And so we enjoyed May Day. One of my alumni remember on that day, ice cream truck from Monticello would come out, and we would be able to buy ice cream from the truck. And that was a special time because having no electricity, well, how were you going to keep, you're going to keep ice cream. So to be able to buy it from the truck was really a privilege back in those days. What else did we do? We took trips. By the time I went to school, we had field trips. Other people remember maybe some type of other entertainment. And I think back in the day when we went to school, there were not so much the school was that entertainment, but for my mother, there was no source of other entertainment for the community. So a lot of activity took place at the school that wasn't taking place by the time I went. So Jody, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Becky. The Rosenwald funded St. John's School was completed in 1923. It replaced an earlier school, and you see a picture of it here, a one-room dilapidated shed that was taken down when the school was built. Unfortunately, this was common for African-American schools prior to 1920. The state did not provide funds for the construction of African-American schools. It had to be done by the community, and as a consequence, the schools were poorly and quickly made. They were very few. They were overcrowded as a result of how few there were. The teachers barely knew more than the students they taught. It's estimated in 1915 that 51% of the white children attended public school, but only 33% of Black children attended. A lot has recently been written and a lot of attention been given to the extraordinary collaboration between Booker T. Washington, the Black president of Tuskegee Institute, and Julius Rosenwald, the Jewish president of Sears, Roebuck and Company. In their remarkable partnership, over a 20-year period from 1912 to 1932, they were responsible for getting over 5,300 new model schools built for African Americans in the rural areas of 15 southern states. There will be additional resource information put into the chat by Dana, including books, pamphlets, websites, even schools, Rosenwald schools that you can visit in Virginia. In Virginia, there were 382 Rosenwald schools constructed, of which only a third of them still exist. And I should have mentioned, of the 5,300 throughout the South, only 10% of those still exist. This is on the screen is a remarkable interactive map put on the web by Preservation Virginia, who about 4 years ago completed a survey of all the Rosenwald schools in Virginia. And this map, like I said, is interactive. You can go on it, hit the standing school symbol for the particular county you're looking at, and it will pop up information on that school, location, the funding sources, if it's available from Fisk, and also pictures. It's a wonderful resource. I really encourage you to take a look at it. In Albemarle County, there's 7 Rosenwald schools. 2 of them have been demolished. 3 of them have been converted to residences. There's one in the western part of the county, Greenwood, that is an abandoned Rosenwald school owned by Mount Zion Baptist Church. A few months ago, Building Goodness Foundation had a cleanup day out there, and we have stayed in touch with the church, hoping to be able to provide some guidance to them for its future preservation. And as you can see on the right is St. John's School, the only one that will be open to the public once it is renovated in Albemarle County. 1920, the Rosenwald Fund school building program moved to Nashville from Tuskegee and started putting out these model school designs. Eventually, they were put together in a booklet, 1924, and these model designs cover all the school sizes from a 1-teacher school all the way up to 7-teacher schools. And they also have 2 different designs for each size school, depending upon the cardinal directions that the school needed to face. It was a requirement starting in 1920s. There were more stricter requirements that the program had for communities wanting Rosenwald schools, that they had to follow an approved plan. They had to follow the specifications put out by the Rosenwald program. This is a wonderful Jackson Davis photograph of a day in Caroline County where the local community is providing or they're raising funds for for an African-American Rosenwald school. The genius of the program created by Rosenwald and Washington is that it required the funding contributions from 3 different entities, from the state, from the local community, and the Rosenwald Fund. And I say genius because this then required the communities, the white and the Black communities, to work together to make these schools happen, and it really resulted in some changes in the interactions in Virginia. The archives for the Rosenwald Fund program are now at Fisk University. It was required that every school constructed from 1920 on had to send in a picture of the completed school, and that's what you see for St. John below. On the top right is information that had to be provided to Rosenwald program on the total cost of the school and the breakdown of funding sources for providing funds for that school. And you can see what the breakdown is here for St. John's. In this case, the public taxpayers contributed $1,300, more than half of what the school eventually cost. And on the left is a blow up of the particular plan, prototype plan used at St. John. It's a 2-teacher school that faced either east or west. On the left is my drawing, my measured floor plan of St. John School as I found it a year and a half ago. And it includes in the red the original walls, and then crosshatched those features that were added later. Once those features are taken out, you get the floor plan on the right, the original floor plan for St. John. And as you can see, compared to prototype plan number 20, it's almost an exact match of it. I'm going to quickly go through some of the features of Rosenwald schools from this period. First, the Cardinal Direction is important because it was required that the harsh southern light not come through the windows into the classrooms. And thus, for an east-west facing school, at St. John, north is to the left, and thus the windows would be facing east. Also, classroom orientation. Teachers were required to be at one end of the classrooms, and the students that faced them were required to have their left-hand side towards the window. This was so that shadows would not be thrown across their desk when they were writing with their right hand. Also, the designs are incredibly compact, well conceived. In this case, at St. John, for this two-teacher school, both classrooms can function independently of the other. Each of them have their own entrance, they have their own cloak rooms, and they have their own access to the industrial room. Another feature of the Rosenwald schools is they all have cloak rooms and industrial rooms. The industrial rooms represent the philosophy of Washington and Rosenwald that vocational arts needed to be taught to African-American children. This kind of compact design also meant that an economical result in one chimney that's able to serve all three classrooms. Also a requirement for lots of blackboards. And in the left-hand side, BB stands for blackboard. And you can see how they're at the ends, just like at St. John. In addition, at St. John, there are more blackboards on sharing the wall with the cloak rooms. And not only were the walls specified, but but also the height of the blackboards are even specified. For the lowest class grades, 28 inches from the floor was required. For intermediate, 30 inches, and for upper grades, 34. And sure enough, at St. John, the north classroom has the 28 inches. And then the south classroom has the 30-inch from the floor, indicating that the north was for the lower grades and the south for the upper. Inside also specific, Rosenwald schools are required to have 12-foot high ceilings. They are required to have windows that stretch from the top of the wainscot chair rail to within 1 foot of the ceiling. In banks, they're required to be double hung for ease of ventilation. Even the paint colors are specified by Rosenwald program. From the chair rail down, the wainscot is to be a dark color, a dark walnut color. The walls are specified to be a buff color, and the ceilings an off-white color. And sure enough, at St. John's, you can see here in this insert that the woodwork and the wainscot are a dark walnut color, and the walls are a lighter color than what's shown here. It follows the specifications to the T. The exterior forms, the schools were 1 story tall, made of readily available materials. They were frame construction, conventional standardized construction, so that local tradesmen could easily build these schools. They also, they were unpretentious, they were plain. little to no ornament on the exterior. They were meant to recede into the landscape, not stand out in the community, but I had, for the schools I've worked on, the interesting thing is that there's still unique attributes and unique qualities about each one of them. Even with all the specifications, the Pine Grove School in Cumberland has a slate roof, which would have been just way too expensive in other parts of the state. But because Cumberland right next to Buckingham Slate, they had the tradespeople on the materials to put on the school. In the Newtown School in Albemarle County, the stone foundation is unusual. And there, they actually know the name of the stonemason that built that foundation. He was their local African-American, and his labor qualified as a contributing fund amount, in-kind contribution towards the funding requirements for the community. At Salem School in Charlotte County, they have a ornamental pressed metal shingle roof system that we hope to be able to restore in the future renovation. And I put this in just as a reminder. Rosenwald schools were not the only schools being built during this time. This is an incredibly active period in educational reform in the state and in the country, really. For instance, when the Rosenwald program started, there were fewer number of African-American schools than what the Rosenwald program eventually built throughout the South, 5,300. But yet, by the end of the Rosenwald program in 1932, Rosenwald schools only represented 1/5 of the schools being built for African-Americans in the country. So you can tell that there is a lot of activity going on in improving schools throughout the South and throughout the country. And I have this because we need to remember that it's not just the Rosenwald schools from this period and that are important historically, but all these schools that still exist, white and Black, represent an amazing progressive period of education in Virginia. Becky, you're on.
Okay. So next I will tell you about the timeline, what has happened since we started our project. We start, of course, the school was constructed in 22-23, and then as 2003, it was a resident. But since we had purchased the school, which is the St. John Church, we have done some repairs to it. Jody, if you show the next slide, that will show that in 2005, we have done some replacement. We have replaced the windows of the school, and that was because they were leaking. And so it was very important that we get that done. So that was done before we became a nonprofit. That was done by the church. We also painted the roof to make sure that it wasn't leaking. And we did preserve the windows, and we will be utilizing those windows as displays. We have some great ideas that we want to do with the windows to have displays in the school. In 2009 was another successful project that we did. And as we went along, we were a little undecided after we bought it in 2003, what we wanted to do with the school. And so in 2009, we held a reunion, which was very successful. We had over 40 or 50 alumni to attend that reunion. And at the time, there were about 70 alumni still alive. And so we, at the picture at the bottom, is a display of all the attendees. We were in our blue and gold, which is our colors. We had guest speakers to come in. And so it's just a great time. And that was when we did a survey to talk to the alumni and see what they wanted to do with the school, some ideas they may have. A lot of the descendants were there, and they participate even in helping us organize the event, as they always do. We have great support from the community. And also during that time, we did oral history. There was a project going on that by the Albemarle County Historical Preservation Committee. And they were recording interviews of the alumni. Sitting at the table there, we have two of the oldest ones that were alive at that time. Mrs. Bernice Mitchell is on your right, and Miss Alberta Brassfield on your left. Miss Alberta Brassfield is now 93 years old. She lives in Washington, D.C. She has been very successful, being a nurse, living in Africa, and traveling all over the world. Miss Bernice Mitchell has also been very, she passed, sadly to say, she passed this last year, 2021. And we're so sad about that because she was so enthusiastic about seeing this project completed. And so she was always on the committee, and she was always doing things to encourage us and to help us to make this project come alive. So the lady that's showing there was that doing the interview was, her name was Sarah Bond, and her assistant was Dr. Lynn Rainville. And so we had a great time that day and have learned a lot. And we learned who were alive and who attended, and all the ancestors of the alumni. In 2011, that's when we decided that we needed to form a nonprofit. That same year, we became a 501. We got a 501c3 status. And so the mission, as you can see on the screen, is we want to make sure we have projects that everyone can participate in. Those projects and programs would help us to live a better quality of life. We also want to make sure that this legacy continue. Legacy of education that was established in the past. We want to bring it forth in the future. And we just don't want it just to be for our mind, but we want it to be for our mind, body, and soul. The other thing that we did around 2014 was we developed a newsletter to get the news out to everyone. Very important that when you have a project that you get exposure, that you let people know what you're doing. And that's what we've been doing, trying to do. That's the effort that we've been trying to do, to make everyone aware of the school and what we plan to do with it, our new adapted use for it. Another great occasion that we had was in 2016, when we unveiled our highway marker, the Virginia highway marker. The highway marker indicates that something significant happened in this area at that spot. So we were very successful at getting that done. We paid for that with money that we had raised from fundraisers. The other things other accomplishment that we have made is to be on the National Register. Now, a descendant of the school helped us to get on that register. Her name is Ms. Nia Bates. And on Facebook today, I see that Nia's birthday is today. So happy birthday, Nia. She wrote up the PIF, the initial application. She had approached me one day at a Juneteenth display. Miss Maxine Holland also is a descendant, and she would always invite us to the Juneteenth displays and also the veterans displays. And I was at the Juneteenth, and Miss Nia Bates walked up and spoke to me and introduced herself and offered to write the nominee for us to be on the National Register, and that did happen. So we're very proud of that, very proud of that. So right here, you will see beneath the school, and a project that we started in 2019. I say we because before that, we had applied for grant. And with the assistance of a grant writer, she is a professional grant writer. She has volunteered her time. She does her work pro bono. She's out of North Carolina. Her name also Althea, but her name is Althea Lewis. And so she has been one of the ladies that have been really, really supportive of us, helping us to write our grants. This is the first grant that we got for $75,000 from the Afro-American Civil Rights Grant, and that's managed through the National Park Service. So we're very thankful for her, and she is just awesome. And in addition to that, we got $15,000 also from another organization, a local organization, the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation, from their endowment fund. And so along with the 75,000, along with 15,000, we were able to stabilize the building. And another great organization, foundation that we are so pleased to announce that we are part of. These are all volunteers. They are the part of the design and construction team volunteer, which include Jody, our architect. These are all professionals, and they volunteer their time pro bono. And they have been such a blessing because they are part of the Building Goodness Seville Build project. And that came in effect on 2020. So we all excited about that, and so thankful that we have this team. As you can see, these are project managers, architects, structural engineers, MEP engineers, civil engineers, contractors, and millwork. The whole work, everything you need for a project like ours, and we're so thankful. That picture below is back just in November when we were doing our cleanup day, when we took down some of those walls that were not original to St. John. The community came out to help. It's really amazing how supportive everyone is. And I think this is why our project is so successful, because our alumni, the whole community, the descendants and organizations like Building Goodness Foundation and our grant writer, everyone just pitch in and learn their talents and their skills to us. And they have really make us have a success with this project. Even though it's taken 11 years, that's okay. We're getting there. So
my turn. Tag, I'm it. When I started on this project a year and a half ago, I was honored to be asked to be part of the Building Goodness Foundation team to do the project. One of the first thing I do as a preservation architect is get on site and start doing documentation of the building, and thus the measured drawings, the detailed drawings, photographic documentation, then a condition survey, getting into the attics, the crawl spaces, and identifying the problems with the building that are going to have to be addressed in the subsequent work. Then I start working on identifying the historic and later features. Even some later features can be historic, depending upon if they fall within the period of significance for the building. In St. John's case, that period of significance is up to 1954. And so that means going through, doing field notes, identifying finishes that are part of the residence, infilling of walls, folding partitions, walls, and studying such things as wire nails for infill panels compared to the cut nails used in the wood bead molding on the original walls, and doing probes. And I found through this examination that a good 85% of the original historic finishes were still in place. They had just been covered up by the later residents. That information, along with the information from the committee on how they wanted to use the building, resulted in then designs and then contract documents with the engineers, Spring Point and 2RW and Clark Gathright. Then, well, let me just briefly tell you what our proposed design is. We are needing to put in an exercise room, 2 different multi-purpose rooms that can be used either together or separately. Thus, we're restoring the folding partition that used to be between the 2 classrooms. And I failed to mention that that was an important feature of the Rosenwald schools, to have those a folding partition between the classrooms so that it could be, the classrooms could be combined for a larger community use. The schools were envisioned to be part to serve the community as well as be schools for the community. And the Family Life and Fitness Center wants to have a kitchen so they can serve food. And the classroom, what was the industrial room, is going to be used for computers, as well as a museum display to document the Rosenwald School program and St. John's history. The difference between the petitions that we're putting back and what was there for the residents is that our work will be distinguishable from the historic features. We will be restoring the building otherwise and restoring all the original materials, the finishes. But for the new petitions we're putting back, they will stop 2 feet below the ceiling and have glass put in there so that you can be in one space and see the ceiling going from one to the other and know that this is a later petition. All the wood features are designed to be subtly different than the original so that they can be distinguished from the original. And this is just to show how information is conveyed to the contractor for finishes to be saved and finishes to be removed. Should have mentioned that the reason the residents left in 1954 was because of a fire they had in the kitchen. But all that is repairable. And then we got to the fun part. This fun part lasted for a year. From just a little in January last year to right now, we are just going through all the process of conceptual design approvals by our regulatory agencies, the special use permits through the county, building permits, and then final approvals. And I'm going to stop there. And Becky, take us home.
Okay, thank you, Jody. This sign that you see here, I want you to ignore the buildings and the drawing on it. This was a plan that we had before we decided to make it, to let it remain as is and not try to add on to it. But what is correct on this is that it will be our future home and that it is the St. John Family Life and Fitness Center. We have decided that we want to keep it as it is and has to be remain as a historical building if we let it stay as it is. So what we have done so far, and we're excited to say that Miss Althea Lewis also wrote the second grant for us to the same grant organization, the Afro-American Civil Rights Grant. And this time she did it in 2019. And we were successful at getting $104,000 again from the government. We're contributing $4,000 ourselves towards that. That money would pay for the electric, the heating, the plumbing, and air conditioning. It also will pay for a new well, as well as what else? Installation. In addition to that, we have gotten another grant from the Dave Matthews Band. This is our second grant from them. In 2018, they also provided us assistance with our septic system that we installed in 2018. The second grant that we got, that was a $7,000 grant. The second one is $10,000 grant, and we will make our building handicap accessible with that grant. And then we would contribute $30,000 ourselves towards this project where needed. And so what's remaining is the requirement of interior carpentry. Interior carpentry, we have recalculated, and during the pandemic, lumber and things went up exceedingly high. It's expensive now. So with a lot of the custom made stuff, especially bifold doors and some of the beadboards that have to be restored and some are paid, the final bill for the interior carpentry work will be $216,000. How do we plan to get that? Just like we did before. We'll be writing grants. We have some potential grant private donors that are stepping forward, looking at the possibility of helping us. And so we'll still be having our fundraisers. And of course, we would like to have that money so we can complete the project, the interior part of the project. If you'd like to go to our website, on that website, you will be able to see a little more about what our organization is all about. You'll also be able to listen to those oral interviews that was done in 2009. So we invite you to go to our website and just learn a little more about us. On this chart, it is showing Congressman John Lewis. A lot of successful people attended Rosenwald schools, and Congressman John Lewis was one of them. And so his statement is in, one of his quotes is in a book called A Better Life for Their Children. And this statement says that their partnership demonstrates that concerted action can make America and the world better, which I agree. Also, when I look at this picture, I think of friendship. These two men had a great friendship. You imagine that when Booker T came to Julius Rosenwald with the idea of just contributing seed money to start these 6 schools in Alabama. And he said, Booker T. Washington, president of Tuskegee, we'll do the rest. We just need your seed money. And so they started out that way. But in 1915, Booker T died. And instead of Rosenwald letting this project fall behind or go away, he decided to take it over, the whole project by himself. In 1917, that's when the Rosenwald Fund was created, foundation was created. So he took this project over. So what better friend would you have to want to continue your legacy 15, 16 years after you did? So I think this is true friendship. And I only hope that I will have a friendship like that in my lifetime. Thank you, everyone, for this, for allowing me to present today, and have a blessed day.
Thank you so much, Rebecca and Jody. Rebecca, that was a fantastic story you just shared with us. I think the audience
Thank you.
Loved it as much as I did, and tons of questions have come in. And guess what? We only have 5 minutes, so you guys have to answer these questions really, really, really fast.
Real quick.
Okay, so Jody, you shared a map in the presentation with all the different locations. Someone's asking if you can share that again, or is there a website where they can find that map?
Dana provided that information. It's on the chat. The website for Preservation Virginia.
Great. Is there a connection? Do either of you know if there's a connection between the Rosenwald schools and St. Paul's College in Lawrenceville, Virginia?
A connection between the folks like Jackson Davis and Dillard that go back and forth. And I think there's some other professionals that were shared, but nothing in terms that I know of in terms of the construction program or the design program.
Rebecca, someone's asking, what year were you in the first grade?
1953, 1954. Mhm.
53. Okay, very good.
Okay.
Were there children in your school that had disabilities, and were they able to attend the school? Were they
There were
able to
none in my
participate?
classes that I can remember. I don't remember any kids with disability during the time I went to school, elementary school, rather.
Someone's asking, they're curious to know if the daily opening rituals included lift every voice and sing, or if the anthem was taught to children and sung at special events like graduation.
Probably so, because that's a very difficult song to sing. I can't remember if we sung that. I remember the song being sung in school, but for the first and second grade, I'm not sure. I know probably American the Beautiful or something like that, a little more easier song, but we had our own song. We had
that's right.
song called St. John Gonna Shine Today. So, so we had created our own song. So
I meant to include that.
yes.
Jody, someone's asking about the movable partition. Is it full height of the room?
No, it's not full height of the room. It's a little bit taller. It's a 7 foot tall, at least at St. John, 7 foot tall. And there are two different types that I have found in my research. There's a type that is just simply, and they're just the regular doors with the horizontal panels, horizontal 6-panel doors. And they're simply hinged so that they're like an accordion. And it was fantastic. And the other type that I've seen, Pine Grove has this, where there's a track in the wall, top of the wall, and the doors are actually hung with rollers from that track and still fold up like an accordion. At St. John, when we removed all the later residential material, we were able to see where that door, the accordion door, was swung open and dragged on the floor, and it left that arc on the floor. So that verified the fact that that door did not have a track.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Jody, one more question. Were the packages of material furnished by the Rosenwald School similar to the kits for the Sears homes? The building kits?
No, because the kits for the Sears homes, they were actually the materials. It was the wood, and all the building material was provided in those kits. For the Rosenwald schools, they were the plans, the architectural plans, and specifications, and that's it. That reminds me though of a story where at the beginning of the Rosenwald of the program, where Rosenwald was working with Washington, Rosenwald thought, well, this is easy. We'll just do kits like our Sears homes, and Sears will make kits for Rosenwald schools. And that was pretty quickly shot down by the folks at Tuskegee, because it came out that the local community really depended upon the economics of being able to build the schools themselves, of supplying the materials, of using their services as in-kind donations. So Rosenwald quickly backed off and said, I understand completely, we're going to do it your way. Just an interesting sidelight.
Jody, I've seen a couple of questions come through. If someone lives near a Rosenwald school, or they're knowledgeable about a Rosenwald school that's in disrepair, what should they do, or who should they contact? Is there anyone that you would direct them to?
Anyone to direct them to? Well, I would start off by going to that interactive map and finding out what you can about the school. And if it's a Rosenwald, now it may not be a Rosenwald school. So Department of Historic Resources would be your best bet. For this area, Mark Wagner is the regional director, and that's the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. I wish I had thought of that. I would have put a link to them, but they're the ones I would start with. And anybody who has a school or is part of a group that has a school, the first thing I advise people to do is get to the alumni, get the history of the school. So much of the history of African-American schools is not written down. It's passed down orally. And it's important to get to the folks before they're not here to get those oral histories documented to learn more about the schools. And that's also an incredible way, as Becky described at St. John, of rousing community activism behind the effort of saving the school.
Well, that's a great question to end on with you, Rebecca. What became of those oral histories that were taken and reported?
Could you repeat that again?
The oral histories that were recorded. Where can people find those?
On our website. If you would go to our website and go within the next month, because we're going to change it. We're going to get a new website, but it still be there. Right now, you can find it if you go to our website and you click on the other and go on the sights and sounds, you will find those recordings. I think it's 8 of them. And I'm sure we have more. We just have to work with Lorenza, one of our board members, Lorenza Dickinson, and also a descendant, should be able to help us to find the remainder of those.
Excellent. So go to stjohnfamilylife.org.
Yes.
Find those recordings.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Jody. This was fantastic conversation. I'm going to invite my colleague, Teresa Gano, back to talk about upcoming programs. We can't thank you both enough for speaking with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Althea. Thank you, Jody and Rebecca. What an inspirational hour. And you have imparted so much great history in this last hour. The information, the conversation about these historical Rosenwald schools is really remarkable. As you can tell, this is quite moving and lovely. Thank you so much. Moving forward, we have upcoming UVA events to keep you in the know. Our next UVA Lifetime Learning program in February is our program on Booker T. Washington, the man and his legacy, on February 24th at 3 p.m. Please visit the Lifetime Learning website for future programs, blogs, podcasts, recorded videos, and more at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. Additionally, UVA alumni and parent travel will host Paris, the African-American Experience, from May 28th until June 5th. And you can register for that trip at engagement.virginia.edu/travel. From all of your friends at Lifetime Learning, thank you so much for joining us today. Please stay safe and healthy and have a great afternoon.